Over the past 2 decades, Ethiopia has been striving to revitalize the export sector. The government has designed various strategies to take the country's business activities to the next high level. Though it lacks a good track record, the export business remains high on the government's development agenda. The government is making use of numerous strategies to stimulate the export sector. Creating favorable investment climate for foreign direct investment is one of such interventions. The government is expanding industrial parks in different corners of the country to that end. The manufacturing sector plays a pivotal role in stimulating the economy of any nation. Considering this, the expansion of integrated agro-industrial parks are given prime focus in Ethiopia. Currency devaluation is one of the mechanisms used by different countries ultimately to support the export sector. The move taken by the Ethiopian government would stimulate foreign investors to invest in the country.
There isn't just one reason why countries devalue their currency. But usually, and I've spent many years in countries that constantly devalue their currencies, such as Brazil, such as Argentina in the late 80s and early 90s. So I've actually gone through that process working in these countries and other countries as well. So the primary reason for devaluing a currency is sometimes is to enhance export competitiveness. This is when we're talking about a positive, proactive, what I call currency management. There are some that are drastically forced to devalue currencies because there are issues beyond their control, like complete loss of confidence in the currency.
The currency devaluation announced by Ethiopian government is the other important strategy intended to enhance export. The devaluation will have the capacity to revitalize the export business through imposing exponential rate, which is more directed towards benefiting the foreign investors.
Ethiopian government devalues its currency mainly for promoting export, but not only for promoting export, reduce the demand for foreign currency and increase the availability of foreign currency. If we see that the value of the Ethiopian birr was getting higher compared to foreign currencies in relative term, and that was expressed by the existence of the black market. You know, some 5 years ago, in 2010, after they take devaluation, the black market rate and the official rate was very close, indicating that the birr value was having its real value. But after sometimes, and particularly recently, the black market rate was higher than the official rate, indicating that birr has been overvalued, that the price of US dollar or foreign currency was lower unnecessarily. That means that when the birr value is higher, then our products in the foreign market will be expensive.
When we devalue the currency, how does it promote the export? That's the question that we have to ask. If we take, for example, coffee and gold, they fetch better money in Ethiopia than outside because the level of the exchange rate is very, very low. Now that the exchange rate is better, exporters will have the incentive to export more coffee instead of selling it in country, and to export more gold instead of selling it in country. But this rationale also has some questions attached to it, because one of the primary impact of devaluation is the parallel market, or what you call the black market. For example, today what's happened is with the devaluation of 15%, the official rate has gone to 27 and the parallel market has gone to 33. So the coffee producers would ideally put in 15% more in their products. The business have put 15% in their products. So when we see it from this point of view, the devaluation will not have impact in promoting exports.
Currency by itself is not sufficient, right? So in the case of Ethiopia, it's planning, it's invested a lot, it will continue to invest a lot. Foreign direct investment is coming very substantially. This past year, it was amongst the 5 top FDI destinations in Africa, $3.2 billion, for almost nothing 8 years ago. So to continue to attract FDI, why would a foreign investor come to Ethiopia? Because he's hoping and he's expecting his products produced in Ethiopia will be competitive.
The government is primarily striving to energize the economy by intensifying and diversifying the export sector. Expanding the manufacturing sector through improving the management is one of the interventions in this regard. This is primarily by intensifying agro-processing sector. In doing so, the country would reduce its dependency on foreign imports.
As one of the fastest growing economies, what we need is more and more capital that should fuel investment. Now, what really happens when foreign investors come to Ethiopia is they bring money from their country's banks or from other international banks, and that they would be given probably a percentage of loans from the Development Bank of Ethiopia or from the Commercial Bank of Ethiopia, and then they would be investing. This would inhibit access to Ethiopian investors, the possibility of having foreign capital if these banks were in Ethiopia.
Import dependency through import substitution is the other reason why the country devalued its currency. It is a strategy used by any developing nation to enhance its economic growth and improve the economic situation in the world.
If they want to penetrate a market and they feel like by devaluing their currency they can do that, they were doing that. It's a very smart move that's worked beautifully for the Chinese. So one reason for devaluing would be to enhance export competitiveness. The flip side of that is to discourage imports, which means that you're making imports more expensive. That means consumption locally of imported goods, you hope, will reduce. And guess what? Will be substituted. This is the theoretical concept. You hope it will be substituted by domestic production.
The export-led economic growth is the prime intent of the government earnestly striving to achieve. To this end, the government is adopting policies of organizing the selection of goods to produce domestically.
We have a lot of macroeconomic policies that we have to look into. Number one, to promote foreign direct investment, we need to look into what foreign direct investors are looking for. The ease of investing in Ethiopia, the ease of doing business in Ethiopia, which according to the World Bank report is very, very low compared to many other countries. So what we need to do, frankly, in this sense is to have a general review of our macroeconomic policy.
Having a strong manufacturing sector would enable the country to enhance its revenue from the export sector. Protecting the industry is one way to have a strong manufacturing industry. The government is making incessant effort to expand domestic industries, which become backbone in boosting the economy.
In order to enhance the export sector, as it is known that the export sector is the backbone for the national economy, and we are also aggressively working to realize our GDP plan that highly contribute for our Renaissance goal and plan. So we plan to enter into middle economic status, and also by doing this we will be one of the middle income status nation of the world, so that we are aggressively working for in that regard. So the export sector has a good advantage and also contributes significantly for the fast and sustainable economic development in terms of earning the required foreign exchange or currency, so as to expand infrastructure at all levels.
To alleviate major challenge seen in the export sector, the government and pertinent stakeholders are working hand in hand. Adding values to export products is one of the elements that should be given more emphasis to further returns on the sector.
The Ethiopian government is devaluing, and the main reason that the National Bank of Ethiopia, which is the agency that manages monetary policy, is that they would like to export more of Ethiopian goods, and of course to be able to adjust the balance of payments so that we get more from our exports to balance the amount of imports that we have. If this devaluation is justified, then we have to look at several options that the government would have in terms of its general macroeconomic policy, including the fiscal policy and monetary policy, and then look also how Ethiopia could cope with its export-based and industrial production.
The move taken by the government, mainly to improve export business, would likely increase the influx of foreign direct investment into the country.
There are too many things we import in this country unnecessarily when we can manufacture them domestically. I've always given this very simplistic example just to capture people's mind. You go to any grocery store in Addis or any of the regional capital cities, 90% of the items on the supermarket shelf are imported. It just defies logic. First, the market is here. There's obviously 100 million consumers. So if the market is here and a lot of the stuff can be produced locally, why are we importing? The simple example I give is juice. We import packet juice from the Middle East, from the desert. Countries in the middle of a desert. Even though the raw citrus, the orange, whatever, probably was exported from Ethiopia. But we buy it back as packet juice for much more value than we exported the raw citrus. You can expand that in a lot of things. Coffee, we export raw coffee. Yeah, there's some element we should, but why don't we add value to that? So by devaluing your currency, one of the things you hope to do is import substitution, discourage imports, and local manufacturers who hopefully will take the place and expand both for the domestic and the export market.
Devaluation is one way of promoting the export sector, but it's not the only solution. If we see the means for promoting export is devaluation is one, but there are other reasons. So the productivity of the export sector has to increase so that the cost declines and then will be competitive in the international market. So productivity is very important. So that's one reason why productivity has not been improved in this export sector, or be it in agricultural productivity or industrial productivity.
Improving the currency rate would also optimize and create favorable conditions for the export business. The expansion of manufacturing industries becomes impetus for increasing employment and earning foreign exchange.
If you have an overvalued currency, the price of the export commodities in the international market will be higher, so they are less competitive, and when it is returned into birr, then the local exporter, all those local products which are exportable products, the price will be very low. They get less income.
Expanding the agro-processing and mineral industries is the priority of the government to strengthen the capital-intensive economy. In doing so, investors would significantly make use of the viable opportunity by supporting the young, productive part of the society.
Ethiopia is on the early stages of industrial transformation. Okay? I can make an argument either way that we're at primary commodity exports today. Is there a value of devaluing the currency? You can make a theoretical argument saying maybe not. But you can also say, well, I'm looking down the road, a year or two or three, when my value addition export is very significant. So I want to support it right now. All right? There isn't a perfect argument for these things. What I know happens, in this case, I think what the government has said is, listen, export has been stagnant for 3 years. I mean, I've tracked the numbers. we export less than what the tourism sector generates in hard currency. That just doesn't make any sense. Last year, Ethiopia generated $3.2 billion, the official data says $3.2 billion from tourism. Export, you know how much it was? 2.9 billion. In fact, something really worrisome we need to look at. That 2.9 billion is not too far off for how much money Ethiopia spends on fuel imports.
The government is determined to alleviate the hindrances in the export sector. Improving basic infrastructure such as road and electrifications are some of the leading development agendas held up by Ethiopia to enhance export competitiveness. The impressive economic and social developments that have been registered in Ethiopia over the last decades are part of the overall progress achieved through the mega projects undertaken in the country. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Hydropower Dam is one of the notable giant undertakings which becomes audacious hope for the advancement of the nation.
If we want to promote exports and increase our export earning, devaluation is one, but we have to take similar actions on other factors that affect the export sector.
Ethiopia's attempt in realizing export competitiveness is being seen through the infrastructure development taking place in the country as well. The effort in the sector is showing remarkable progress in enhancing the export sector. As export is a vital means for securing foreign exchange, Ethiopia is intently striving to improve the sector. The strong effort exerted to produce quality export products is the main agenda by the government and stakeholders. The devaluation of currency is only one of the mechanisms taken to improve the export sector.
The experience we have is not that encouraging in many countries in Africa. But if we look at China, for example, its currency is deliberately undervalued because it wants to promote exports. But China has tremendous amount of export base. The Chinese economy is producing goods and services for 1.3 billion people internally in China. So whatever they produce in terms of economies of scale, they can produce one product or one service at the least cost, which would be highly competitive globally. So the challenge is to create an Ethiopian model within which we will look at our specific export potential and import potential.
We need to substitute the importing goods from abroad. In order to substitute, our potential investors should enter into producing on those industrial parks so that it attracts by incentivizing both local and foreign investors. They would be welcomed to engage in producing value-added goods on those established planted factories and manufacturing industries, so that the foreign direct investors or foreign investors should be invited, should be attracted to process, to manufacture value-added goods on those factories.
Currency devaluation significantly boosts exports, shrink trade deficits, and reduce sovereign debt burdens. It also reduces import by encouraging industrialization, which produces import substitutions. The achievements secured give a strong impetus for stakeholders and other pertinent bodies for more efficiency.